Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. One of Kierkegaard's famous stories is the one about the ducks. He visions a society of ducks, and on Sunday the ducks waddle to church. The big mallard duck stands up front and preaches, "God has given you wings. With wings we can fly. With wings we can soar to the heavens." After the worship, all the ducks commented on what a wonderful sermon it had been, and then they all waddled home. As we continue this week of looking at some of the things Danish philosopher and theologian Søren Kierkegaard said, that story about the ducks reaches in and provokes us, doesn't it? We are all guilty of paying lip service to our faith, but not putting it into action. Or maybe we might say claiming faith, but not putting action into it. That easy faith, that faith where our Christianity doesn't mean much, is the topic of many things Kierkegaard said. Early sociologists studied religion, and one of the observations that surfaced was that a society where everybody is Christian, in a society like that, where everybody's Christian, nobody is Christian. What that means is that when Christianity is the accepted norm of society, then there's nothing distinctive about it. Faith gets watered down to the lowest common denominator that we are all comfortable with. And that's not faith at all. I think Kierkegaard would agree. Let's look at some things Kierkegaard said about distinctive Christianity. First, Kierkegaard makes the same point we've been talking about very succinctly and powerfully. He wrote, "The apostasy from Christianity will come about by everybody openly..." Let's try that again. The apostasy from Christianity will not come about by everybody openly renouncing Christianity. No, but slyly, cunningly, by everybody assuming the name of being Christian. Kierkegaard thinks that turning from the Christian faith won't happen by people openly and loudly proclaiming against it. Rather, he argues, Christianity, true Christianity, will be abandoned and become emptied of meaning precisely because it becomes the norm of society. This may be a difficult concept to grab hold of. Maybe we might think of it like a kite. A kite rises against the wind. The string forces the kite to resist the prevailing breeze in order to rise. Without that string holding it tight against the wind, the kite falls. Just so, authentic Christianity stands against the prevailing winds of society. Christians are called, as St. Paul said, to be in the world, but not of the world. The Christian way of life, the Christian way of living is not the world's way. The world, for example, might well say, look out for yourself and do good for yourself, but Jesus calls us to love and look out for others and to do good for others. Christians are called to transform the world with actions of love. So, Kierkegaard warns against the quiet, slow progression of assimilation of the culture into the heart of our faith. You may remember that when the Israelites entered the Promised Land, they were told not to intermarry with any of the local people, and rather to keep their bloodline pure. The truth is that this didn't have anything to do with actual bloodlines or racial animus, but rather God knew that intermarriage with those of other religions and cultures would, over time, weaken the foundations of faith they were supposed to cling to. That's why there was the rule not to intermarry. Faith in God would become adulterated and less than it was supposed to be in their lives. In another place, Kierkegaard makes this same point perhaps even more succinctly and powerfully when he wrote, "There was a time when no one—" let's try that again, I'll keep messing those up. "There was a time when one could almost be afraid to call himself a disciple of Christ because it meant so much. Now one can do it with complete ease because it means nothing at all." Kierkegaard harkens back to the time when people were persecuted for their faith, and one might hesitate to claim the Christian faith for fear of what might happen to you. We might think of the disciples cowering in the upper room after Jesus was crucified, afraid for their lives, or Peter denying Jesus 3 times in the courtyard of the high priest. Now Kierkegaard argues, it's become so comfortable and easy to be a Christian that it has no meaning. Is that a question we should consider in our lives today? For our last quote from Kierkegaard today, I want to turn to one that perhaps expresses a way that being Christian calls us to reach beyond what we normally think of as faith, and so marks Christianity as distinctive and highlights the radical call of Christ on our lives. Just as Christ tells the rich young ruler to sell all his goods and give to the poor, so one could also speak of the requirement to give all his rank and dignity to the poor, something we are even more reluctant to give. I think this cuts 2 ways. First, there is the simple meaning of the text. We may be comfortable to toss a few dollars at one of society's problems like homelessness or hunger, but Kierkegaard seems to indicate that we are called to give up our position in society too. Perhaps, to put it in biblical terms, those who seek to save their life lose it, but those who lose their life for Jesus' sake find it. The call is not to give just our dollars, but our selfhood for others. Kierkegaard is right. We are very reluctant to do this. We are reluctant to give up our comforts, our pleasures, our reputations, and our ease. We cling to our status and social standing. Nevertheless, Kierkegaard points out, what are these things in the face of your brother or sister in need? What would Jesus do? The other aspect of this reminds me of going to feed the homeless in downtown Columbia. Redeemer will take a group of volunteers to serve food, and as we typically decide who is doing what, the man in charge usually comes to me and says, "We have enough people to serve. You go out among our guests and visit." So that's what I do. Maybe a better way of putting that is that I go out among these folks who are so often ignored, driven away, without a friend or much hope at all. And I try to treat them like people. I am tasked to forsake my own status and place in society, to walk on an even level with these folks who are seldom treated that way. I am called to give them dignity as a loved child of God, just like me, no matter what. Maybe this is part of what Kierkegaard means in his quote. We give up our dignity and personhood in order to offer it and find it in another. St. Paul talks about this in Philippians when he speaks of Christ, who was equal with God, who emptied himself of all that power and glory to become one of us and to suffer and die on the cross. Suddenly, we discover that what we are called to do for others is the very thing that Jesus did for us. Maybe to paraphrase, God has given you love. With love we can fly. With love we can soar to the heavens. Now, don't waddle home. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.